Right now.
Right now.
Right now.
Right now.
Right now.
Because it's time to write now. And welcome to the Story and Critique stream, where I read stories from writers in the community. Fantasy, sci-fi, mystery, thriller, horror, memoir, 200 stories and counting, and many, many more. So welcome, I'm Kauffman, and I am a writing enthusiast who loves the writing process and wants to help writers with the lifestyle, mindset, and process that it takes to become a writer. So come join us because we're starting right now. So for today's Story and Critique show, episode 37, if you want to submit and you want feedback on your story, make sure to go down below the YouTube description and click on the link. There's a Google Doc and a Google form that's going to help you sign up so that way you can submit your story either for today's or if you're watching this on the replay on the next stream. So that way you can get help with your story. All right, beautiful, my friends. Perfect. So that's linked, like I said, down in the YouTube description. Excellent. I was like, I could have totally had that. Let me pull it up and I'll drop it down into the chat for everybody. For anybody who has yet to submit story and critique submission. There you go. I just dropped that down into the chat for everyone so you can all get into it if you have yet to submit a story for today's stream. Excellent. And by the way, if you really want to show your support, or as you know, we have so many submissions. We're probably between 15 to 20 submissions for today's show. So if you want to improve the likelihood of getting your show or getting your story on today's stream, dropping a super chat goes a long way. I always try to prioritize writers who we haven't seen their story yet, and then super chats, as that helps keep the business running, helps keep the lights on. So that always makes a difference. And then let's get into the critique portion of this. So how do I do a critique? All right. And as you can see here, so I have the critique show guidelines. I like to break down critiques into kind of 6 elements, but I don't worry too much about grammar, so we just go with 5. We go with character development, world building, dialogue, plot, or structure. When I'm reading a story and I'm trying to get a better understanding of what needs to be improved or what opportunities there are or what I like, I ask myself, is it a character development problem, a world, a dialogue, and so on and so forth? This helps writers who are trying to get feedback get actionable and tangible advice. So that way they can literally go off right after they watch this and then start working on their story immediately. So that's how I like to do it. I feel like that's been a very effective way. And then as I go through the stories, you might see me highlighting. No worries. Highlighting is neither a good nor a bad thing. That's just a way to help me keep track of what things that I want to touch upon when I go back to the critique itself. So no worries, no pressure. I know exactly what it's like submitting your story to have it read, whether it's in a live format like this or in any type of group of writers. And most importantly, if you're here in the live chat, join the conversation. Or even if you're watching this on the replay, come join the conversation. If you read or you hear something on screen and you're like, hey, that sounds really cool, drop a comment. If there's something like, hey, that doesn't make sense, this doesn't make sense because of this. You can offer suggestions if there's something you would do differently, because I guarantee you, whether the writer is here in the stream right now or they're watching this on the replay, they will be getting so much value, not just from my expertise, but from yours as well. Each of you who are watching this have such a range of writing experience, and that's what I love about the WriteNow community. We have writers from all backgrounds, all genres, and all expertise. All right, my friends. So I think that knocks all that out of the way. So let's get into the first one. I'm going to be kicking it off today with Michael Bates. We're going to be starting off with Fairyland Deaths, which is an urban fantasy by Mr. Michael Bates. So Michael, let me pull yours up over here. All right, so we have our critique show guidelines here. And then I have Fairyland Deaths. And I think this will be the vibe. All right, perfect. So I'm going to be kicking off Mike with Fairyland Deaths. I am so excited, so stoked. So let's cue this one up on the stream. By the way, I know I saw a couple more holistic. Glad to have you in the stream, my friend. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Mast, you said don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Don't forget the Wonder Right Now Discord. Appreciate you so much, my friend. Really, really makes a difference. Really, really appreciate it. All right. So let's get right into it with Mike's Fairyland Deaths. And let me just make sure you can see it on your screen. I have to check it. All right. So I'm making sure that you guys can see it on your screen. All right. Yeah, I mean, it's all right. It looks a little blurry. Yeah, it looks a little blurry, which is kind of funky. Okay, so I'm gonna drop this real fast and let's reshare it. Okay, and then let's see if that makes a difference. It's just looking a little blurrier than I would like, and I'm not sure why. It's once again, as you guys are aware of the new streaming studio setup, I'm working through a lot of logistics and trying to better understand how to make this new streaming experience as effective as possible. So it's not horrible, it's still doable. I'm like checking what you guys are seeing on your end. So I mean, it's slightly blurrier than I would like, but it's readable, so it's not horrible. Okay, so let's hop into it. All right, so I am all ready. Let's get underway. So, Fairyland Deaths. This is the start to an urban fantasy set in the current day. The working title is Fairyland Deaths, but more than likely it will be Raven Mage something something. March 20th, Spring Equinox. Chapter 1 or prologue. Breaking the balance of life. Tisha should have let Alec drive. The thought hit hard as the snow thickened and swallowed the road ahead. The flakes fell in heavy sheets, swirling through the dark like restless ghosts. Her grip tightened on the steering wheel, forcing her focus forward. The roads were slick with fresh snow, and large flakes swirled in the dark just after 9 p.m. Alec had offered to pick her up, but she had said no. She would be okay driving home. Now she regretted her earlier decision to insist Alec stay home. She didn't want to distract him because he had an important test tomorrow. With Cornelius Pass Road closed, she had no choice but to take Loggy Trail Road, a twisting, narrow bypass, infamous for its street drop offs and sharp switchbacks. As her car climbed higher into the forested hills, the heater fought against the creeping cold. A slow shiver traced up Tisha's spine. The heater was blasting, but her skin still prickled with cold. She rubbed her arms, her fingertips dragging over goosebumps that had nothing to do with the temperature. That feeling didn't fade. Her grip tightened on the wheel as she checked the rearview mirror. Nothing, just snow and dark. And yet, the sensation didn't leave, like something was watching from just beyond the swirling white. She checked the rearview mirror, but the road behind her was empty, just snow and dark. A shiver crawled up her spine. I should have let Alec come for me. He would have insisted if he had known this road was closed. The tires crunched over the slush as she eased into the first switchback. On her left, the cliff plunged sharply into the dark, broken only by the faint outline of snow covered trees and the shadowy creek far below. The right side of the road pressed her close to the rock face, looming and wet from the snowmelt. Her pulse quickened as she navigated the curve carefully. Almost home. Just a little further. The bend straightened, and a blast of light, blinding, unnatural. A bang exploded against the rock face. The back of her car jerked sideways. Tisha screamed, gripping the wheel as the tires spun, uselessly. The car lurched, metal crunching as it slammed into the rock wall. Then it bounced back into the road. Another flash, another bang. The car skidded left toward the drop. The flash of light seared through the dark, unnatural, blinding. A blast followed, too loud, too close. The black tires jerked hard to the right. Tisha yanked the wheel, but it was useless. The car slammed into the rock wall, metal crunching, glass shattering. She barely had time to breathe. Another flash, another bang. The car lurched left. Her stomach plummeted. Tisha's fingers clenched the wheel as the tires glided, faster, uncontrollable. The edge loomed. Trees rushed forward, their branches sharp as knives. No, no, no! She gave the car a touch of gas to straighten it, but it was too late. The car hit a massive tree with a sickening jolt. The world tilted sharply, and Tisha's stomach churned as everything stilled. She sat frozen, breaths coming in ragged gasps. Slowly, she looked in the side mirror. The back tire hung halfway over the edge of the cliff. The rear door, pressed into a tree, was the only thing keeping the car from plunging into darkness. Stay calm. Just stay calm. Tisha turned off the latch with shaking hands. It finally clicked free. She reached into her purse to search for her phone. Tisha paused, her hand still in her purse. She saw a faint light flickering in the distance. The light grew brighter from down the road, but it wasn't a car's headlight. Tisha squinted through the windshield. A light. Small. Flickering. A lantern? A flashlight? Her pulse slowed slightly. Maybe someone saw the accident. Maybe they could help. Then the light didn't flicker anymore. It stretched unnaturally, like it was coming from anything at all. Like it wasn't coming from anything at all. She swallowed hard, dread curling tight in her stomach. A figure emerged, a tall, thin man, his pale skin nearly glowing against the gray clothes that clung to his angular frame. As he approached the driver's side door, the light vanished behind him, and his footsteps became eerily silent. Tisha's instincts screamed for her to stay still, but her reflexes betrayed her when he motioned for her to lower the window. She cracked the window open enough to speak, her voice trembling. "Thank you for stopping." The man tilted his head, his cold, dispassionate eyes locking on hers. He seemed to take her in entirely, as though she were only an object to be evaluated. His voice was smooth and hollow when he finally spoke, tinged with an Irish brogue. "You are not the Raven Mage." Tisha froze, her breath catching in her throat. Raven Mage? What was he talking about? He paused, a cruel smile flickering across his lips. "You are the mage's wife. Ah, this is grand. This will hurt him more than his own death." The word struck her with the force of icy water. A shiver ran through her as confusion twisted into fear. Mage's wife? Was he talking about Alec? Her mind scrambled for clarity, but his hand shot through the open window before she could respond. His grip was sudden, unrelenting, and impossibly intense. His fingers closed around Tisha's neck like iron. Panic surged as she screamed, her voice raw with terror. What are you doing?" Tisha clawed at his hands, her nails scraping against his gray skin. Only flakes came away under her fingertips, but it didn't matter. He didn't flinch, didn't react. Her pulse thundered in her ears. The world blurred at the edges, her body screaming for air. Tisha kicked wildly, slamming her knee into the dashboard. Nothing. She tried to twist free, but his grip was like steel, unmoving. Her fingers scrabbled for something. Anything. Her purse, the keys. Her nails tore against his wrist, but his skin didn't even dent. A sob ripped from her throat. Not like this. She struggled against the inevitable, her chest heaving and her lungs burning for air. Panic roared through her, but his strength was monstrous. A sharp twist sent pain exploding at the base of her skull, bright and searing. A sharp twist, a white hot flash of pain, then a crack. Deep, final. Sound drained from the world. Tisha's last thought wasn't fear. It wasn't pain. It was Alec. Wow, 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 wow. What a moving piece. So stuff. That was so crazy. I was like, what was that? In such a good way. In such a good way. I felt like I was so intrigued. I was so pulled into that first chapter. Now, Mike, I know we've gone through, I believe it was the second chapter in the critique group. So I know I have an idea of where the story is heading. And I think my initial gut, so let's see, how am I feeling? So overall, story is great. That was definitely in a great place. I think it intrigued for all the right reasons. I think there's a couple of line edits that could happen to really clarify her the crash itself. I think I didn't quite understand how she crashed and if the crash was from the gray man's magic, but maybe it's not too important. Like that might not actually be super relevant at this stage of it. So I kind of went back and forth on that. But as I look into what worked very well, I would say I liked the character development. I was definitely a fan of, I would say the character development of Tisha was very well done. We got to know her in such a small we got to know her in such like a short period of time, and that was actually well done. And we know, right? Clearly, this is about Alec, right? This evil dude just either killed her. It kind of feels like he killed her. I think that's kind of the vibe that it's giving off. It feels like he killed her potentially, and this is really a setup for Alec's journey. Now, what's interesting is you had said this was a chapter 1 or prologue question mark, which tells me that you were going back and forth on which one this should be. Now, we've had the prologue conversation a couple times. Yeah, we've definitely had the prologue conversation a couple times before here in the community. Now, if and this is where my thoughts are as a prologue, Mike. I think that if Tisha, if she comes back later in the story and she becomes a character, then this would be chapter 1. If Tisha is not a character and this is just like the only chapter, the only scene that's setting it up, I would argue that this might actually be a prologue. Because if our protagonist, which is Alec, if this is his story, technically Alec's story, like I mean, it's done interestingly where technically it's starting with her death, but I would argue that the first chapter should be with Alec. It should definitely be with Alec. And Mast, you brought up a really good point, right? Oh no, that's not the one. What was it? You said there's definitely room for character development. No offense, but I did not care about Alec and still also Tisha. Maybe it's just me, right? And this is the thing that you run into, right? So since you haven't set up anything for us with Alec, then like literally like when the character says, "Oh, this is for Alec," we're like, "Okay, well, we don't really care because we haven't even been introduced to Alec. Who's that? Tisha should let Alec drive." And while you did let us you did mention Alec throughout with Tisha, right now the chapter wants us to care about Tisha. So I would say that the biggest opportunity would probably be, I mean, if you want us to care more about Alec, it would be a character development for Alec. I think you did a good job of making us care about Tisha. I think that was well done. I loved the dialogue. Your dialogue and narrative for this was actually really interesting. That really stood out to me. Yeah, so I would say that would really stand out to me. I would say dialogue, character development, and I think the plot are probably my favorite elements of this. Let's go through it and see what we can find. So, like I said, the biggest thing, if you want us to care more about Alec by the time Tisha meets her end at the end of the chapter, then what you should do is you should include Alec in this chapter through either a phone call or through Tisha's recollection of who Alec is, right? Before she gets into this crash. If you want the reader to care about Alec, how does Tisha feel about Alec? Is there something quirky that Alec does that Tisha loves about him? You could still do it in a way without actually having Alec in the chapter, but that is if you want us to care more about Alec by the time Tisha dies. I see what you're saying. It's like this is the inciting instant, and Alec comes in as the main character in the next chapter. So, Mike, the problem with that is it's okay. So I could see that it's an inciting instant, but because we haven't been introduced to Alec, that could create potential confusion for the reader, right? So usually the inciting instant will happen after we set up our protagonist's journey. And since we don't know and we don't care about Alec, it might make when we're introduced to the problem that you could run into is that now the reader's going to care about Tisha and you just killed off Tisha. So then they're going to be like, oh, okay, well, Alec's here. Now they're going to be hoping that Tisha comes back into the story. So I think that that's part of the risk that you run. And let me look at the ending. Let me see if is it clear that she died? She struggled against the inevitable, her chest heaving and her lungs burning. Panic. A sharp twist sent pain exploding at the base of her skull, bright and searing. A sharp twist, a white-hot flash of pain. Then a crack, deep, final. Sound drained from the world. Tisha's last thought wasn't fear. It wasn't pain. It was Alec. Yeah, so I mean, I think this is definitely, I think there's definitely enough here to suggest that Tisha is dead, which might make the reader care less about Alec. It might be a little harder. So essentially what you're going to need to do is you're either going to need to set up Alec, you're going to need to add there's a couple of ways you can go about it. You either need to add an additional chapter to set up Alec before Tisha's killed off. Option one. Option two, have some type of phone call or conversation so we get some inclination of who Alec is. Or, as I shared before, give us an idea of who Alec is through Tisha's recollection of Alec, right? Tisha's driving and then she goes to grab her coffee and she realizes, oh, I grabbed Alec's coffee mug. She drinks it. Matcha. Him and his tea. I can't stand that garbage, right? Things like that. And that would be the way that you would show it. And I think you could do that cleverly enough times before Tisha crashes to really make the reader like care about Alec through Tisha's. And I actually I like that you started with this Tisha car scene. I actually did like it. And like from a structure perspective, it's not a bad scene at all. It's just for us to care about the protagonist, we need a reason to care about them. Especially if this is the inciting instant, we have to care about them before the inciting instant happens. And the inciting instant is really Tisha's death. So I would say that would be the biggest thing. So, okay. So let me go scene by scene what we got. So swirling through the dark like restless go. And once again, Mike, your writing is so on point. I absolutely love your poetic style. Let's just like listen to this, right? The flakes fell in heavy sheets, swirling through the dark like restless ghosts. That is such a beautiful line. The flakes fell in heavy sheets, swirling through the dark like restless ghosts. That paints such a clear picture for me. And you do that a lot. Your descriptions are very, very on point. Your language is very, very well done, Mike. I really want to congratulate you on that because you have a very unique style with your writing. And I think that is absolutely something to be commended. So I'm really, really happy about that. Yeah, and I think one of the great things I see this, you're like, I heard some things that could be removed as they were duplicates. And this is the great thing when we have our stories read aloud. We were able to hear things and we're like, hey, on page that sounded good, but hearing it aloud, you're like, okay, that it you hear the repetitive nature of lines more frequently. So absolutely, that's very, very cool to hear. Let's see. and throw it on the dark just after 9 p.m. Alec had offered to pick her up. So, and things like this, right? So it's not that you do mention Alec throughout. It's not that you don't mention him, but you don't give us any type of emotional connection, right? The roads were slick with fresh snow and large flakes. Swirled in the dark just after 9. Alec had offered to pick her up, but she had said no. And I'm like, all right, that reminds us about Alec, but that doesn't give us any emotional tie with Alec. I would rather this being said, Alec had offered to pick her up, and then let's have a moment of interiority for Tisha. Alec had offered to pick her up, but she had said no. He always wanted to be such a knight in shining armor. It bugged her. And then she looked at his picture on the dashboard. She loved the stupid idiot. Right? Things like that. So it's like anytime you mention Alec, we need to have an emotional connection with Tisha, because Tisha's character doesn't actually really matter. It's actually all about Alec. So anytime Alec's mentioned, we need an emotional reason why Tisha loves him. And then it actually gives the reader like, oh, there's these quirky things about Alec. So then at the last page of this chapter, like, oh yeah, Alec seems like he's an interesting dude. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. You're definitely picking up on it. Like, I need a show they're in love and husband and wife. Completely agree. Completely agree. Let's see. All right, and then what do we got next? So let's see. She didn't want to distract him because she had an important test tomorrow. She rubbed at her arms, her fingertips dragging over goosebumps that had nothing to do with the temperature. Oof. I love that. I absolutely love that. This really does some great foreshadowing. You're doing some really great foreshadowing in this chapter as well. Right. You're doing some really good foreshadowing, Mike. I think you have a good understanding of how to foreshadow effectively. Because I even remember with your previous work, I think foreshadowing you do well with, which of course as fantasy readers, that's something that we need. All right, so then let's get to this car crash. So her pulse quickened as she navigated the curve carefully. Almost home, just a little further. The bend straightened and a blast of light, blinding, unnatural. Bang exploded against the rock face. The back of her car jerked sideways. Tisha screamed. The car lurched, bounced back into the road. The Tisha screamed, gripping the wheels. The tire spun uselessly. The car lurched, metal crunching as it slammed into the rock wall. Then it bounced back into the road. Another flash. Another bang. The bench straightened and a blast of light, blinding unnatural. I mean, I guess it doesn't actually matter where the blast of light, or I just assume it's happening ahead in the road. I think when I saw this, I'm like, where is the blast of light coming from? Is it, I mean, technically your blast of light, so it's probably blocks her entire rear view mirror. But then, so if she's driving straight, so she's driving straight, blast of light, I assumed it was coming here, but you're saying it's slamming her against the rock face, which means the blast of light has to be coming from an angle of some type, because the bend straightened. I mean, the bend straightened here. So I mean, the blast has to be coming from this angle, so that way she gets pushed into the rock face. And I mean, this could just be me, but it might be helpful to indicate where the blast of light is coming from. But this might just be a me thing, like what direction. Gripping, the car lurched, then it bounced back on the road. The car lurched, and then it slams into the wall, and then back onto the road. Another flash, another bang. The car skidded left toward the drop. Then it bounced back into the road. So flash. Okay, so it's like flash, car hits rock face, car bounces back onto the road. Another flash. Car skids left towards a drop. The rock face is on the right. Okay, I mean that my sense of direction. So flash. Okay, so she comes around. She comes around a corner. Flash hits the wall, bounces back, Another flash, skids towards the left, off the road. A blast followed, too loud, too close. The back tires jerked hard to the right. Tisha yanked the wheel, but it was useless. All right, so we have blast 1 here. Tisha screamed, the rock wall, then it bounced back. Then we have blast here too. And I assume this is a flash of light. A blast of light is the blast. It's a blast that's creating a flash of light. So we have blast of light 1, blast of light 2. Flash of light seared through the dark, unnatural. Another flash, another bang. So that's referring to the second one. A blast followed. So this is blast 3. The Tisha yanked the wheel. She really had to before another flash. Blast 4. The car lurched left. I think for storytelling purposes, and this is just something I like to see, I would cut it down to 3. Yeah, I would say yes. The blast comes from the left and pushes the car. Okay, yeah, so I see what you're saying. So I think it's just, and that's actually an easy fix, Mike. I think I would recommend, and this just because I like relying on rule of threes, I would cut it down to 3 blasts and then have the third one, the one that almost sends the car over the ledge. But that's just a personal preference. All right, so that's with the crash, and then let's see, where are we? Tisha turned off the engine and fumbled with the seatbelt. Driving with the latch with shaking hands. Let's see. And then, I mean, even after this crash, this is probably a good moment to remind us of our protagonist again, to remind us of Alec. So after the crash, this would be a great moment for her to try to call Alec, or maybe try to leave a voicemail or something. That would actually be another good moment right before she's approached by the figure. Once we have the gray man, that is really creepy. That was actually really, really creepy. Figure emerged, a tall, thin man. Yeah, I liked the gray man. The gray man's super cool. I mean, he's super cool in that next section too, in the next chapter. But this gray man dude is super cool. He totally strikes me as a vampire. The gray man. She cracked the window open enough to speak, her voice trembling. Thank you for stopping. The man tilted his head. Yep. He seemed to take her in entirely as though she were only an object to be evaluated. His voice was smooth and hollow when he finally spoke, tinged with an Irish brogue. How interesting that there's an Irish undertone. That is interesting. That actually made me really intrigued in this villain. You are not the Raven Mage. And I think so. Once the gray man is introduced, I actually am really good with the rest of this chapter. I don't think I have any issues because all of his dialogue, your description in his dialogue is very on point. You are the mage's wife. This is grand. This will hurt him more than his own death. Yeah, and you can even add another moment here if you really wanted to elevate her and Alec's love for each other. Of was he talking about Alec? She imagined Alec hearing of her death or something like that. You could do some type of emotional tie-in again real quick. His grip was sudden and impossible intense. Her nails tore against his wrist, but his skin didn't even dent. I was like, all right. I was like, I kind of back and forth on dent as a word. Dent, mark with the dent. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that's fine. Sob ripped from her throat, not like this. She struggled against the inevitable. Yeah, and I mean, her death, this death scene's very well done. I'm actually very happy with the death scene. And if we care about Alec by the time it ends here, then it just does, it will set up and we'll care about our protagonist, which is why I think this would be a better prologue, since it's not really about, since right now in this current state, it's not really about Alec at all. Right now it's about Tish's death, and this chapter should be about Alec. No, this chapter should be about how the reader believes Alec will respond to Tish's death, having not yet to meet him. So that's really the setup, especially since this is inciting incident in this chapter. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and you could always start on a phone call. I mean, that'd be an easy way. You could always start on a phone call with them, but there's no right or wrong way to that. So, but yeah, thank you for submitting, Mike. That's everything that I have for you, my friend. And I can definitely tell a lot of the readers in the community really enjoyed that as well. So I can definitely tell a lot of writers had some really, really great recommendations in here. But thank you so much for submitting that, Mike. I know we read a later section of that in the critique group, and I am absolutely a fan of the story. I would definitively pick it up. As a fantasy reader, this is my type of reading. So really, really great work so far, and I am so intrigued by the start of this world that you're creating. I'm like so intrigued by it. I send more, I'll read more in the future. So definitely looking forward to it. Thanks again, my friend. All right, let's see. And then, Mass, you actually had a good question. Like, instead of grammar, structure, replace it with tone and or style for the critique guidelines. Structure, grammar, tone, style. Yeah, and I mean, for the critique guidelines, that could be a good possibility. Grammar and structure, tone, and style. Yeah, actually, for the critique guidelines, that actually could be a good replacement. I still think structure and grammar work as better overarching pillars of writing elements, but I think for the critique show itself, tone and style would be a good alternative. Thanks for that. Awesome. So that was a great, great recommendation. And that was great. Wonderful. So I felt really good about that. Did you guys like that? I could tell, like, I was absolutely enjoying that. How was that for a first starter one? What a great way to kick into it. And then what we're going to be hopping into next, we'll be hopping into Morgana's. We're going to be hopping into your next, into Ash. So we'll be hopping next into your story in just a moment, my friend. So stay tuned. Definitely looking forward to that. Now we're getting to kind of switch gears a little bit, and we're going to be hopping into some science fantasy. Ooh, I love sci fantasy. So much fun. So really, really cool. I was like, and I can tell here in the chat, people were enjoying it as well. Mike, like, thanks. Everyone had good ideas as well. Yeah, and there's definitely some really good recommendations. Yeah, and I think it's also important to recognize. I think Mike shared that this. I was like, what draft was this on? I want to say that this was what, on like a second to fourth draft, I believe. Yeah, I want to say that Mike had said that this was a yeah, so this is still the first draft. So like with qualifiers and grammatical stuff and word choice, we don't even want to worry about that yet, right? We don't want to worry about grammar. We don't want to worry about the word choice until it gets later in the revision process. Right now, the focus is we really want to focus on making sure that the characters work, the story development works, and the style of it is very efficient. So that way, whenever Mike is ready to go through the editing stage, then you're like, okay, then we really nail down that word choice. So awesome. Glad to have you guys in here. Unknown, it's great to have you back in the stream. I believe you submitted a story. I believe you submitted a story at one point. So we'll see if we have time to get to yours today, which would be super cool. Let's see. Okay, yeah, Mike, you said yours was a second draft. Yep, so that totally makes sense. Yeah. And I mean, I really believe that like we can improve we want to like elevate the style, the grammar, the word choice as much as possible in early drafts, but it's never I don't think it should be a priority until it goes through editing, right? I think if we come out with a lot of cool style and a lot of cool sentences, that's a huge plus. But what happens if you write some really great sentences, style for your chapters, and then you have to change some of them because structurally they just don't make sense based off the character journey and the world building. This is why developmental editing comes before line editing and copy editing, specifically for those reasons. Mary, like sometimes grammar issues take me out of the story. I may be a tad OCD. That's totally understandable. I usually don't get taken out of it with grammar issues unless it's like an extreme amount. But I mean, if it's like a published story and there's grammar issues, that's a problem, right? And unfortunately, we see that more frequently with the self published market because it's more accessible for writers and editing services can be pricey. So, completely understandable. All right. And before we hop into the next story, if you're enjoying the stream, follow and subscribe. We're here every day with the Right Now community, 418 consecutive streams and counting. If you're looking for daily writing motivation, we have writing sprints, our critique show, our author podcast interview. We have our weekly writers group. We have a book club just around the corner. After that, we'll be hosting our next Fated Fantasy Fiction contest and so much more. Make sure if you want to be alerted when we go live to tap that follow or subscribe button, and you'll know when we're live streaming. All right, beautiful. So I wanted to get the subscribe ad in there, and it's time to hop into Ash. So let me pull up your story, my friend. Let's see. All right. So we're going to be hopping into it. And I know, Morgana, I saw that you mentioned a comment. Let's see. Let me hop over to the comments before we get started. All right, and let's see what we got. So, Morgana, you said, I will probably put in disclaimers during the live reading because Into Ash's prologue has changed. It's expanded by 295 words, and a good majority of the words are drastically different. The character of the Empress is also name dropped in the newer version, and Mei Jin is better characterized to fit his new role in the story as I make him a more prominent figure. The reason I count this as a prologue because I do a POV shift. Wonderful. Thank you for the heads up. Very much appreciated. Let's see. And then I think when you had submitted this, yeah, because you had submitted it a couple weeks ago, right? So now we're going into it now. So it makes sense that you probably made adjustments since then. And let's see. Novel. Yeah. So it looks like you've definitely taken this story through a couple drafts. Let's see. And Lillian, you said that you're not hearing it. Hmm. Aw, thank you so much, Mass Toast. I really appreciate that. Like, don't forget the $5 tier and the $10 tier. That is the awesome critique group. Absolutely. I will officially be launching the $10 tier in about a week, which is going to be very, very cool. And the $5 tier, if you want to become a YouTube channel member, is a great way to support the community. All you have to do is hit that join button down below the YouTube video. And let me just see, like, Lillian, I'm not seeing or hearing the stream. Let me just real fast, I'm going to pull it up on my phone and see if I'm getting the audio. I just want to make sure. I'm going to test it. Give me just a second. Everybody else, can anybody else hear it? You guys can all hear me fine, right? Is it just got to fiddle with your sound? Okay. Everybody else, can anybody else? Yeah, so I can hear it on my phone. It sounds like Lillian, it was just fixing the sound on yours. So let's see. Oh, I see it. Got to fiddle. Yeah, you know, those adjustments, right? Hey, what's up, Viking? Welcome to the stream, my friend. You're like, can I submit a ODT file instead of Word? I'm using LibreOffice and would have to transfer it over somehow otherwise. So I'm not sure if I'll be able to open up an ODT file. What I actually would recommend, Viking, is just transfer it over to Google Doc. You could literally just transfer it to Google Doc pretty easily. So that would be my recommendation. You could try an ODT file. I'm just not sure if I'll be able to open it up or not. On the submission link, and I'll drop that submission link for you guys one more time. There we go. So I just dropped that. That's the critique submission link one more time. You can try both. Maybe try an ODT file and then also give me like a Google Doc link and we could see. I could try both. All right. And let's see, I can hear it. Perfect. So you guys can hear it. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Feeling wonderful. Okay. So I am feeling really, really good about this. And let's see, what do we got here? Morgana, perfect. So I think awesome. The spacing is all correct of it. And I know, Morgana, you said you were going to adjust something there. 1 sec. I can probably get this shifted to match now. So 1 second. Okay. Hey, what's up, Ghost Cat? You're like, hello, hello, my friend. You're like, I am doing great. We had a great first story to the stream so far, so I was really happy with how the first story came out. We're just about to hop into our second story right now. Oh, what's up, Ghost Cat? You're over in Idaho as well. You're like, I just thought it's a nice warm day here in Idaho. Ghost, cheers, my friend. I am in Idaho with you, so totally very, very cool. Yeah, the weather here in this state has been very rainy with some mixes of snow as of late. All right, and let's get into it. So, let's see what you got. So this is the second draft, first draft of rewrites. I'll get to draft 3 at the latest May 7th. This will be updated, and it looks like you gave us a lot of pronunciations. All right, so what I need to do, I need to open this on another screen and make sure that I have the pronunciations to look at as I'm reading through it. And I think that will be the way to go about this. All right, and I think I am all ready. Okay, so all right, I'm all ready. So let's hop into it, into the rain. All right, let's see. Morgana, I saw that you said you're putting in the new version of the prologue. Just let me know. Because I'm going to get started because we need to move along here. So I'm just going to get started here, and then you can just let me know if there was some other adjustments that needed to be made to it. All right, So, and I think I have the pronunciation guide over here. So I think I should be good from a pronunciation standpoint. I was like making sure I have all the characters' names. I like that you have a pronunciation guide, and it sounds like you have a lot of character names with unique pronunciations, which is so important for fantasy stories, especially when you're using a really unique name structure. All right. All right, perfect. So I'm going to assume Morgana that you just fixed it. So I'm going to hop straight into it. Ah, all right. So I'm going to assume that that is the updated one. All right. So I just adjust the wording on it. Okay. All right. So let's get into it. So I'm going to start here, and I'm going to assume that this is the adjusted prologue. So Into Ash, a science fantasy by Morgana Alice Graves. Thick black smoke pervaded the air, trapping the clear skies in a blanket. The only difference, the blanket had been gifted to the people of Minraxon, didn't provide the warmth that they desperately craved. It only provided destruction. A country that had once been filled with peace was only filled with mass hysteria. It ran rampant, plaguing the minds of the innocent. The smoke moved in a manner that felt unnatural, as though it had been made by those who resided within the mortal plane. The creators of deadly gases understood the ways of Lin Atma, of Lin Ahatma. They were harvesting the mysteries it held. If the smoke didn't seem off, then it would be the fire that followed in its wake. It was rigid and unchanged by nature. Something, no, someone, was giving the order. They were telling the flames where to go. It was a planned attack upon the large nation. The gods could never foresee such an attack. They never allowed it. It felt like a nightmare that no one could wake from. Sharper than a geon, a voice rang through the masses. From a towering palace that spanned 8 floors above ground, she emerged. One that commanded respect. Remain calm! She cried out, looking down upon the masses of people that were frozen in place. They were stricken with fear, something that she knew she couldn't be. If it was her will, then it would be done. Her very image commanded respect. Her people needed her. A country was only as strong as its weakest link. She wasn't going to let that weak link be her. The ones who were not frozen in fear had turned themselves to face the sources of the voice, and they stared in awe. They knew who it was. Even though they had seen her before, they drank her essence. The radiance that she held illuminated the area. Empress, one of the many that gazed upon her regal visage intoned. His voice sounded breathless. The Empress's lips, that were once locked into a smile, had fallen. She had been waiting for this moment since she was the tender age of 10. She had seen the development of such technology, but she had never seen it be used for nefarious purposes before. It made her stomach churn. Her head began to pound. Her hands clenched themselves into a fist. Gazing upon the soul that uttered her title, she began to feel. She began to feel. Uh, She had been waiting for this moment since she was the tender age of 10. She had seen the development of such technology, but she had never seen it used for nefarious purposes before. It made her stomach churn. Her head began to pound. Her hands clenched themselves into a fist. Gazing upon the soul that uttered her title, she began to feel anguish like anything she had felt before. The pain was like a knot in her chest. "What is it?" the Empress asked. Her voice faltered. "What do we do?" the voice that was laced with fear asked. The Empress didn't know what to say. She was rendered speechless as she saw the line of armored soldiers clad in black and white, armor that held a dark purpose. For once, she was grateful that her only child was sleeping peacefully and far from the destruction. The relief that she felt was real, even if it were for a fleeting moment. The Empress looked at the skies, trying to identify where the flames were coming from. The second she saw the drones humming over, drones that had cameras and lasers attached, she swore that her heart would stop at that very moment. It hit her eyes. It hit her. Her eyes widened in fear. Even if she knew there were countries that didn't agree with the way that she had chosen to rule, she didn't think they would go to the extremes of technological warfare. The swishing of a scarlet hanfu with silver web embroidery paired with small and delicate steps had come from behind the Empress, steps that were clearly disguised. "Oh, my sweet Abakane. Oh, my sweet Abakane." A voice filled with honey spoke. "Meijin," the Empress spoke. Her voice was blunt as she uttered his name, a name that she wasn't sure truly belonged to him. It felt bitter when it crossed her lips. He simpered, hoping his darling Abakane would turn to face him. When it was apparent she wasn't going to, he skillfully maneuvered himself to where he would be beside the Empress, that he cherished. His eyes were locked on the flames. "The attack has come early, hasn't it?" he asked. Abakane heaved a sigh, knowing he had a way of getting answers out of people. Out of all the talents that Mei Jin possessed, hiding who he was, but still retaining the nature of who he really was, happened to be one of them. "It appears so," she said. Her eyes were growing tired as she turned back to the palace that she had resided within. "What of your child?" Meijin asked. While his blood was boiling, he had to dial himself back. Every part of him was fighting the urge to join in mass warfare. "She's asleep, far from all of this," Abakane responded. Meijin placed his hand on Abakane's shoulder. He knew her back was turned to him, but he could see the armored soldiers shift into something that he didn't know his gift of warfare could bring. He hadn't planned it as he watched the figures come closer in perfect formation. They appeared as large deer, antlers spanning across several meters. Meijin recognized the animal that they were shifting into, large and majestic. The soldiers that were approaching took the image of the Rithelkin deer. "Do you want your daughter safe?" he asked, a rush of his original seeping through his voice. Abakane turned back to look at Meijin. There was a twinkle in his eye, one that he always got when a rage-filled thought crossed his mind. "More than anything. Then allow me to take her out of here, and let me take you as well. I know somewhere we can go." "And where might that be?" "Chrysaline, more specifically, Nesca. They will take people like us." The knot had returned to Abakane's stomach. She hoped he was joking. "Where is she?" Abakane stammered, knowing that if she told a man filled with vengeance where her daughter was, it would be the end. She wasn't sure if she wanted to let go so soon. "Empress," Meijin started, "do not make me ask this again. Where is she. A harsh growl was laced through the once honey-like voice, another fire that was raging, one that he could hold on to, his own. Abakane stiffened as she watched the flames part. She had seen fire before, but not like this. A fire that was crafted by low, flying drones was never one that she expected. Through the chaos that rose, she had almost forgotten how massive her palace was. It stuck out like a sore thumb. The amount of floors that could be seen from the ground was enough. Get the impression that it would dwarf anything that came in its wake. As for the color of the palace, it was a chilling shade of crimson. If it weren't for both of those factors, there would be no reason for it to be a target. Abakane's mind was in shambles. She could have fled with her child or stay with her people. Either way, the decision would send chills down her spine. The very chills that she had felt when watching the creation of the deadliest of weapons, or when she had lost her husband to a demon that made himself known as death. The Empress felt torn between the decisions that were laid before her. Her eyes darted to the top of the palace and met the window that pulled light through the nursery. Meijin followed Abakane's gaze. He wasn't going to let the certain destruction take the innocent baby that was sleeping soundlessly along with everyone else. A new life deserved time to grow. It deserved to learn, something that a vengeful god should have known from the beginning. The Empress wished she hadn't given up the location, but it was too late. Her actions couldn't be taken back. Her child's fate had been sealed before she could even speak. Meijin was certain that the Empress knew better than most, but he was not ready to stand idly by while her life was at stake. What about you? The Empress felt her lips parting. She knew what words she was going to say. She had prepared herself. Are you familiar with the phrase, "A captain goes down with his ship"? Meijin felt his heart drop. You're giving up that easily? Your baby needs a mother. I know you have my best interest at heart, but this is my empire, not yours, she uttered. Her voice was filled with the same fury that Meijin had when they first met. His heart nearly stopped. He knew the Empress had fight in her, but he had never seen it firsthand. He was used to the Empress remaining composed, even in times of crisis. All right. Interesting. So you have a really Yeah, there we go. Yeah, so you have a really interesting setup for both of these characters. I find it extremely fascinating that you've led with the character arc of this Empress who really just wants to protect her baby. At the same time, she, like, her life is her empire, and you could tell how relevant and how important the empire is to her just in general. And I actually thought that was very, very clever. I was actually such a fan of that. I was like, I'm going to adjust this real fast. Yeah, so I was actually such a fan of that and how you decided to go about setting up the character's motivation. I felt like I felt like Abakane's motivation was very, very clear. And I think what's also interesting is that this is a prologue. So then, actually, I want to go to. I'm just going down farther into the chapter. I wanted to see. Yeah, so I think with what we've read, that looks like that's maybe about 60% through the prologue. It looks like there's a couple more pages. And let's see, chapter 1. Oh, I love the character. Oh, you guys have to see this. I love that you have character art on here, by the way. Right. So I'm just like looking at this. I was like, oh, that's cool. I just went down because I wanted to see what we had set up for part 1. And that's very cool. I love the character art. Love it, Morgana. It's so cool. And something tells me Portrait of Zulong. So these are probably going into our protagonists. Yeah, something I was really curious about is if we were getting a setup for who the main character was. That's something that I was kind of interested in, but it sounds like you're probably trying to set up either the baby. So my guess is that the protagonist is either the baby or that this thing that's happening is more setting up for world building. It could be one of those two things. Either this is a world building setup and this is setting up the tone for the overarching series, or this is setting up for the baby who is really the protagonist. So that was very, very cool. Yeah, so I would say from a character development perspective, it for plot wise, let me go down here. So when I go down here and I see what we had, so I would say that I think I found both of them interesting. I totally understood her character development and I understood her motivation. We did a little bit of world building, and it's always hard to tell from a plot or structure style how it integrates and fits into the rest of the story, since this is technically a prologue. And a prologue is set before the story even begins. So I think that's always something to keep in mind. But your tone and style was great. I think you did a pretty good job of setting up this world and setting up this the initial stakes of the character. So let's go in and let's see what we can find. Now, I love this. I love the way that you opened it with this black smoke. I think that was actually very, very well done, and I found that very intriguing. Right, that this our opening image is some type of black smoke, and I can't tell if it's just like a normal black smoke or if it's something from fire, or maybe it's something that's like magical, but it kind of almost has like the smoke almost has its own presence. And I think that was a really interesting way to open this, and I was actually such a fan of that. And also, Morgana, I hope that with all the names, I hope I didn't butcher any of the names at all. That your pronunciation guide was definitely very, very helpful, by the way. And absolutely, I think your pronunciation guide, you're probably going to have it at the beginning of your book, because you have so many. Actually, I think I would do like a small pronunciation guide at the beginning, and then have the full one at the end of the book for like the important names. So when I'm looking at this and I'm asking myself like what adjustments I would make, I'm kind of, let's see. So I'm looking, it was a planned attack upon the large nation. Yeah. So I'm looking at this, and it was a planned attack upon the large nation. Let's see. So I like that. I like that the smoke's leading into this. This is the narrator. Let's see if like a night word that no one could wake from. Sharper than Aegean, a voice rang to the masses. From a towering palace that spanned 8 floors above ground, she emerged, one that commanded respect. Let's see. They were stricken with fear, something that she knew she couldn't be if it was her will in her very image. You know, something that I might recommend, Morgana, I think they were stricken with fear, remain calm. I think I would almost consider adjusting the townspeople. I would I get why, because you're trying to build up her presence, but I feel like this would almost be a little stronger if instead of going to the townspeople, kind of giving her POV on how she just staying in how she believes the townspeople are. Because this pulled me out of her interiority a little bit, because we start with the smoke, and then we're leading to it was a planned attack, and then I was like, okay, well now I want to be in her head, right? And I like this because now you're setting us up on the Empress. I feel like it could be a little stronger if we go into her interiority immediately. And because you're trying to set up like her presence, but I think you could still do that of she looks down upon the town people cowering before her. She knew that they thought that she was divine and beautiful, but she all had to command respect. So I think that might make it a little stronger for helping us stay in the Empress's interiority, as compared to switching to the townspeople. Because the townspeople, when they started talking, that just pulled me out a little bit, but nothing crazy. But I think that's how I would punch it up. The Empress's lips that were once locked into a smile had fallen. That gives me like a clear idea of who this Empress. Like, okay, now we're like in this moment where she's addressing her inhabitants, all the residents of her kingdom, because this evil smoke monster is attacking, or smoke magic, or whatever it is. And then we get her backstory. So I like that. We get a little bit of a backstory. Yeah, I would say that almost after the smoke monster, or after this remain calm, I think this could be way stronger going into this bit right here, because I want to get into her head and into the plot of what's about to happen. Which really the plot of this section of this scene is really between her and Meijin. So we want to get to the Meijin thing a little faster, because that's where that's what's going to shift and help us understand the motivation with the baby. And something else I would consider, Morgana, because you hyped up the smoke so much, refer back to the smoke again. Because you have her looking at the skies trying to identify the flames, but focus on the smoke, because you did such a great job of painting that imagery and the visualization with the smoke in the beginning. Anytime you refer to how she's to whatever this imminent threat is, refer to the smoke, because you've already cemented that in the reader's mind. So then, like, oh yeah, this evil cloud of smoke. So I would reference back the smoke here. And I like that you touch upon the child. Um, I might almost introduce her gratitude for the child when we're first introduced to the Empress at the very beginning. Because I mean, actually, no, take that back. Take that back. No, I don't. No, because you wanted to set her up as this powerful Empress first. So no, wait, that's fine. The swishing of a scarlet hanfu with silver web embroidery paired with small and delicate steps had come from behind the Empress. Steps that were clearly disguised. So my only question right now is if we're in her POV, and technically you've gone through you started off with the narrator, so this can still work. But if you want us to stay in her head and her POV, and if somebody's coming up from behind her, how do we know that somebody's coming up from behind her? If you want us to be in the Empress's POV, what I would just adjust something like, she heard the swishing of a scarlet hanfu with silver web embroidery paired with small and delicate steps. Yeah, I would just adjust the phrasing of the sentence to insinuate that she's the one. She hears a sound behind her and she immediately knows who it is, because she recognizes those footsteps anywhere. Right? Because you could get away with this doing a narrator thing, but this would actually be stronger staying in the Empress's mind, since we're really trying to get into her fear right now. And I like this. A voice filled with honey spoke. I like, okay, so a voice filled with honey spoke. And then you could go something like this. I would go a voice spoke, full of honey, and a voice spoke full of honey and sugar. Something like that. I would just reframe, because you could do speak at the end. That's fine. This is editor me coming out. You want to get the speech tag closer to the dialogue. It just makes it a little stronger. But then the reader's going to be like, a voice spoke full of honey and sugar. So I add the description, or add this part of the clause after the comma, and that still works. That would just be just a editing recommendation. And then we get the two characters, Mei Jin And something that I was kind of going back and forth on, so you switch POVs back and forth between them a couple times, which is fine. That's totally fine. You can switch POVs. Let's see, the attack, his eyes were locked in the flames. Where was I? All right, so I need to check something because this is a POV thing that I'm not quite sure about. I'm curious how many times that you go into his POV. All right, so this is Mei Jin's. So I'm kind of thinking, I'm like, I don't know if Mei Jin's POV is necessary because you really want us to care about the Empress. But you know what? This is a subjective thing. I'm curious how many times you go into his POV. He simpered, hoping his darling Abakane. Let's see. I was okay. So I mean, you do it you do it a number of times. It's ingrained in the chapter. The Empress felt I had my best interest. His heart nearly stopped. Below this point is all Meijin. Okay, so that's good to know. So then the next section is Meijin's POV. Yeah, so you know what I would actually do? I would recommend, so that way we can stay in the Empress's POV, so then we get a clear POV shift. I would almost, and this is just subjective idea here. I think it could make it stronger. So right now you have Meijin has one, two, three, I think five, four, five. So Mei Jin has five POV paragraphs in this first section. I think it would be stronger if you stayed in the Empress's POV. Because the reason being is this first section, you want the reader to care about the Empress and the Empress's child, and going back and forth between two characters, like, it's fine, it does work. I wouldn't say that it's horrible, but I think the reader, you can make them care a little bit more emotionally if we get the interiority of the Empress and how she feels about her baby versus her empire. That's very, very powerful, and especially since the back half of the chapter is Meijin anyways, I think I would recommend, and like I said, it's only 5 paragraphs, so it's not actually too difficult of a fix, but I'd say that's something to consider, especially because this is a prologue. And granted, without knowing the story, right? Since this is a prologue, this is really setting up the world. Um, yeah, yeah, and I mean, like, once again, my guess is it's probably about the baby, right? The baby is probably the protagonist. So yeah, that would just be a suggestion on my part. I think that would make the reader care more about the Empress, and then in turn about the baby, which is my guess is you probably want them to care about the baby. And all the descriptions that you have about Majin is actually really interesting. Like, I'm intrigued about Majin's character. And I think if you do less of his POV, you can actually create intrigue about his character, because he kind of comes across as this, like, cool, like, he speaks with honey, but he kind of comes across as, like, maybe like rogue, like assassin, soldier type character. And it actually builds a little intrigue. I feel like I'd get a little bit more intrigue out of him if I'm just getting the skewed perspective from the Empress, and then we switch to his POV in the next section. So let's see. And then I know you had mentioned a couple things throughout. Okay. Yeah, so I saw that you had mentioned this a few minutes back about this is the first revision from 17-year-old me, and now I'm touching this 10 years later. We'll definitely go back after the full novel has been drafted. Mostly going back because of the change of Mei Jin, who's now a super prominent figure because of his new lore. Gotcha. Okay. So since Mei Jin is a predominant figure, then I think it would be powerful to foreshadow who the Empress thinks Mei Jin is. So I think that actually could still work, keeping in the Empress's POV. Unless you wanted the whole chapter to be Mei Jin POV. But it sounds like Mei Jin gets a lot of screen time later on, or a lot of book time, so let's see. And then yeah, and then Brain, you bring up a really interesting point. So any POV shift forces the reader to reorient themselves rather than feel what the POV is feeling. And yeah, so there is truth to that, and there's a lot of writers who can do multiple POVs. Like there's stories that can go back and forth between multiple POVs, right? Game of Thrones does that all the time. But anytime that you have a new POV, you have to orient the reader around how does this person think, and then how is this person's thought process different from another character, and you have to spend time setting up each POV. And especially because like you can go back and forth paragraph from paragraph, but the more POVs you add in a scene, anything outside of one just adds additional level of complexity. And since we're spending time with Mei Jin in the next section, I think focusing on the Empress's POV will just make this emotionally stronger. Yeah, like out of all the talents that Majin possessed, hiding who he was, but still retaining the nature of who he really was, happened to be one of them. So, I mean, yeah, of course, the sentence itself could be cleaned up, but I think it gives us some really interesting insight into Majin as a character. And I want more of this type of thing because this builds intrigue for Majin from the Empress's POV, especially since we're going to get more of Majin in the next section and more predominantly throughout the story. So yeah, I think more things like this would actually be really intriguing in this first part. Yeah, and like I said, like you can do multiple characters, you can do multiple POVs, and you can go back and forth. That's totally fine, and we do it in fiction writing all the time, especially for fantasy stories. But we need to, if you're going to switch POVs every like paragraph, then what you have to do is you have to make sure that the reader understands the different POVs. You have to make sure that they understand the different POVs from the beginning. So that would mean that the reader would have to clearly understand how does the Empress think, and then how does the Mei Jin think. So that way, when you go back and forth, the reader is understanding of like, okay, when the character says, I want to kill kittens, they're not going to get that confused with the next character says, oh, I want to kill puppies. So then when their things alternate, it's very clear to the reader. So that way, the reader doesn't chance getting confused section by section, right? And then let's say you throw in a third one of a third character who loves unicorns, right? So then if there's the character with the kittens, the unicorns, the puppies, oh, that's clear because you've set it up and you've made it clear that each of these characters care and think about these types of things. Yeah, and I mean it's possible to have many POVs in a chapter. Like you can totally have stories where there's like so many POVs, so many in a single chapter, but it just really depends on what the story is and what you're trying to create. Hmm. Yeah, and I've mentioned head hopping before on the stream. I think head hopping, I and that's the thing is I don't think this is an example of head hopping, because Morgana is clear that there's the different character POVs. Like it's the paragraphs a change. So I don't think it's a confusion. I just think that it would create a more smoother reading experience for adjusting the POV in this first prologue. Morgana is funny. Like Majin is a very war driven. So with the revamping of chapter one, which is happening now, I'm kind of laughing with how stupid some of my characters but you know what, Morgana? That's the beautiful thing, part of the story development process. We have these ideas of our characters and our stories in the beginning, and then as they evolve throughout the story, we get to the end and we're like, wow, these characters, like, they're awesome or they suck, but there's things that work about the characters. Then it's just our job to make the things that work more effective. That's totally happened for a lot of my characters as well, Morgana. I could totally relate with that. Right, and you know that, like, that is something like you could play more into the omniscient narration side of it, and it does kinda do that a little bit in the very beginning, but it starts with omniscient in the first, like, couple paragraphs, and then it transitions and it's empress. If you stayed omniscient the entire chapter, that could be a thing, but based on the flow and the pacing of the dialogue, I don't think a lot of this is omniscient. My guess is omniscient is probably used for setup for a lot of the chapters and settings, but that would just be a guess. So the armored soldiers thing is cool. I like, and I see, what I love about this is that this prologue has some elements of fantasy a little bit. Now I'm kind of feeling like the smoke is something magical. I don't know why. I just got a sense that the something to do with the smoke was magical. But then we also get these like science fiction elements here with these like these type of like armored soldiers who look like large antlered deer. Yeah, they're like what are they? Like mech? What are the thing? They're like transformers. I forgot what those things are called. They're like transformers. They look like they're transforming. They're these like metal soldiers that are shifting into this like deer-like forms. Oh, and something like this, the not had returned to Abakane's stomach. She had hoped he was joking. I would add either a speech tag, or a dialogue, I would go like something like that. The knot had returned to Abakane's stomach. Where is she? Oh no, there's a better way to do this. I don't like the two sheets back to back. Maybe go like that. Let's see, Crystalline, more specifically Nesca, they will take people like us. The Nada returned to Abakane's stomach. She hoped he was joking. Where is she? Abakane stammered, knowing that if she told a man filled with vengeance where her daughter was, it would be the end. Oh, right, there you go, right? So this is Meijin, right? So then that totally threw me off. So adding the speech tag makes that difference. Um, perfect. Wakane stammered, knowing that she told a man filled with vengeance. Empress Meijin started. Do not make me ask this again. Where is she? And I like that. This is where the tension builds. I really want to get to this moment sooner in the chapter. I would almost recommend cutting some of their early dialogue because this is the tension point right here. This is so interesting to me. Um, yeah, I think if you do cut down on some of his POV stuff, I think I would say I want to get to this moment, this part of the moment. Yeah, I just want to get here a little sooner. If it's at all possible to make some adjustments, because this is a very intriguing tension point right here. And then we see the change of character, right? And I like that. That's intriguing to me. And this is interesting. Through the chaos that rose, she had almost forgotten how massive her palace was. That it, this is intriguing because it's like, okay, so she's so focused on maybe running her empire that she doesn't take time to think about, like, this is like her, this is part of her empire. Her palace is her empire. I don't like I don't know if the palace description is important here. I think this would actually be more important setting up when we first set up the palace. Like, the empress strides out of the palace, glancing over her shoulder. She forgot how big it was, and so on and so forth. I think this could be a little bit more effective here because you've built up tension here. So now with this, we either want to increase the tension even more, or because we want something to happen, right? But what happens right now is we increase the tension and then we kind of lose the tension here. Fire that was crafted. She watched the flames part. She had seen fire before, but not like this. Because now we're just kind of going into, okay, well, this is what the place looks like. But it just doesn't do anything for this tension building here. So I think I'm kind of should have fled. Either way, the decision would send chills down her spine. And I didn't see where the Empress felt torn. There were her eyes darted to the top floor. I missed this. The Empress wished she hadn't given up the location, but it was too late. I didn't see that she gave up the decision. Like, I didn't see that she had given up her child's location at all. I would say because Emperor Meijin asks here, but then all of this is just description. All this is just like setting with kind of getting some like of how she feels, but I don't get. And then we go here, but I don't actually see that the Empress gave up the location. So this could just be me, but I feel like we might have missed something here, or it just wasn't clear. The Empress wished she hadn't given up the location. So I think I would just clarify that, unless I missed it. Okay. So I had a feeling you were going to do that. The Empress felt torn between her eyes darted the top floor of the palace and met the window that pulled light through the nursery. Okay. So okay, I see what you're doing. So you're using her gaze here on the description. I see what you're doing. So I think what you need to do then is you just need to make it a little clearer. I actually like that. That's actually interesting to me, but I as a reader missed that. And it could just be because I'm doing it from a live experience. That's absolutely a factor. But I think once she does that, Mei Jin needs to confirm that. Mei Jin nodded and said, I'll protect the child. Thank you. I think we just need some type of either verbal or him doing a physical thing that acknowledges that she's giving it up. Because the reason I had missed that was because you had been doing this the past couple paragraphs of her kind of looking at her palace and getting lost in her head. And I lost that because that had been interiority. But if this happened right after, where is she? If it was like Empress Major, don't make me ask this again. Where is she? And then it goes straight to the Empress felt torn between the decisions that were laid before her. Her eyes darted to the top of the palace and met the window that pulled light through the nursery. Mei Jin nodded. I think that would make it a lot clearer. I think that would make it a lot more clear, which is why a lot of this, I'm like, could potentially like move this or find another place. So I think that could be a way to just make that a little clearer for us. And then that would make this more obvious. Meijin wasn't certain that the Empress knew better than most. I like that. I actually like this captain goes down with the ship bit. That was actually, I was like, yeah, she feels like the captain of her empire. And I think this section would be stronger if you, and her voice was filled with the same fury that Mei Jin had when they first met. I feel like this section would be stronger if you ended on here. Because I know you have my best interest at heart, but this is my empire, not yours, she uttered. Her voice was filled with the same fury that Mei Jin had when they first met. I actually like this because this ends it off on a higher tonal inflection point. So I would end this section off right here. And then we get the POV shift with Mei Jin, which is interesting because this is clear now we're in Mei Jin's POV. So yeah. Yep, that's everything that I got for you, Morgana. Once again, it sounds like a really cool setup to a story. I'm actually really intrigued. I'm really, really intrigued. And I once again I love the artwork that you have down here. I'm intrigued by the story. I kind of want to know more about Mei Jin. After reading this first section, I actually found Mei Jin the most intriguing. As a reader, Mei Jin to me is the most intriguing character in that first section. The Empress is like kind of interesting, but for some reason, because there's a little bit more mystery and intrigue around Mei Jin, as a reader, I feel a little bit more interested in wanting to understand who is Mei Jin as a character. So yeah, so I think that would be my biggest recommendation. And once again, I love that you got some character art here. It's super cool. Yeah. So awesome. Thanks so much for sharing that, Morgana. That was a cool, cool opening. Thank you so much, my friend. Yeah, Morgana, you're like, Majin's an interesting character, and what I love doing with him in the version I have now, that I can make him a very mercurial person. He can have his moments of being super war driven, but also very sweet. Yeah, I kind of like that. I think that's actually super cool. So, but Morgana, thank you again. Once again, thank you for submitting. I know you shared that you had kind of had some bad experiences with some previous, um, with in some other communities. So I just wanted to call out and thank you because I felt like that was a pretty good reading. So thanks for submitting. Definitely feel free to resubmit again in the future if you want to go through future more excerpts of the story. So very, very cool. Awesome. And then let's see. I know I had seen a question over here. Trying to see. I think I saw so Smooth. I saw that you asked a question. You're like, is there a word limit on submissions? No, there is not. You can submit however long you want. Just know that the submission is anything that fits into roughly a 10-minute reading. So usually I can read about maybe 5 to 7 pages in 10 minutes. So that's I try to give that as an average. Anything I can read through in about 10 minutes. Next move, you sending in 40K words. Well, I definitely won't be able to read through 40,000 words in 10 minutes. So yeah, but you can totally do that. And what people will do is they'll submit and they'll have me start at the beginning, and then they'll resubmit, and we can just continue on in future critique streams. I mean, like I said, this is the 37th episode of the critique show, and we've done well over 200 excerpts now, and some of those have been continuations over time. So that's definitely an option as well. All right, beautiful. Woo! So I'm feeling good. Ah, what a cool story. I love fantasy sci-fi. That's kind of interesting, and I want to see what more the fantasy elements are of that story. That's interesting. All right. So the next story we're going to be hopping into is a drama. So we're actually going to be mixing up the genre and hopping into a genre, which will be called Turbulence, and is a drama by Ghost Cat. So Ghost Cat, we're going to be hopping into your story next. I'll be queuing it up in just a moment. But in the meantime, I just want to do a quick call out first for editing and writing writer coaching services. So something that I do, as aside from the social media stuff, I'm a writing coach and a book editor. I was like, I should probably show up. I'll throw up my website here. So I'm a writing coach and a book editor. If you're looking for feedback on your story, I do all different types of writing services. So I offer writer coaching, where I basically will work with writers one-on-one, and we can work through different story elements, where either we can talk about stories through book development sessions, or I can help you with figuring out like what the problems are of your stories. I absolutely The coaching portion is awesome. Coaching is kind of like a lower cost method of, if you're like, hey, I need help with a story and I just need to talk about it for a few hours, or maybe you want to email back and forth and you're like, hey, I want more help with these editing sections. I do an hourly coaching model and then a monthly coaching model for writers who need help with that. And then for the book editing, I offer, for book editing, I offer 4 different types of book editing services. So you can see here, let's see, actually, I kind of like this. I like this one more. So you can see here, let me switch this. So you can see here, I offer 4 different types of editing services. I offer developmental, line editing, copy editing, and proofreading. And the unique thing that I offer with my services is I offer a story Bible. So the great thing about getting a story Bible is the story Bible is basically a layout of all your character development, your world building, your plot, and all the different elements of your story into one document. It's a great way to organize all the different things into one thing. And this is especially awesome for writers who are working in a series. Let me tell you, if you're working on book 3, you're not going to remember the innkeeper's eye color from book 1. You're not going to remember the types of trees that you wrote in book 2, unless that's maybe like a major plot point. But the more that series expand, the more that you need to document the information correctly. So that way you don't have to waste time of like, okay, book 3, I'm on page 100. And I was like, okay, well, the innkeeper's eyes. Where was the innkeeper in book 1? Now I have to go back through book 1 and I have to go read through the document. I have to like, okay, I think it was chapter this or this. And then you have to do that all the time because you're going to be making references to early in the series. This is why story Bibles are so important. That's something that I offer as an additional part of my services, especially for the editing services. So I always like to call that out because other editors don't offer story Bibles, and that's something unique that I like to help writers with. So yeah, I am very good. I just do a little editor background bio, and then I kind of just give some examples. I have a whole testimonial section here, which I'm like very happy about. And I'm so grateful that a lot of the writers offered, or a lot of my previous clients offered their like testimonials. So like you could go to the page and I'll throw it down here. The link is down in the YouTube description, but I'll also throw it down in the comments as well. If you want to go check out the website, and if you're the next time you're looking for a book editor or you're looking for a writing coach to definitely help out. Aw, thank you so much, Courtney. Like, so worth using his services. Much, much appreciated, my friend. Mass toaster, I love that. You're like, remember, if you have an issue and can't use Kauffman for some reason, remember, put a dragon on it. Cheers. Absolutely. Cheers, my friend. Love, love, love that. Absolutely agreed. So I wanted to make sure that I did that call out for writing editing services because right now I'm currently taking on a couple more clients and you should definitely reach out because my schedule books out really quickly. What I've learned, and especially like book editing takes time, and then balancing that with all of the other things that I'm doing is can be challenging. So highly, highly recommend. And then for writers who just want to know more about it, I offer free consultations. So that way you can kind of talk through what you're looking for. And I can let you know if I'm even able to help you out and bring you value. The one thing I care about is bringing writers value, especially when money is concerned. So very, very importante. Let's see. And then I saw a question here. Now, Lillian, it sounds like you're probably submitting a story, like any formatting recommendations. Great question. I will double spaced everything, and then I use Georgia font for all of it. So I will double space in Georgia font, and then I will blow up the text. I'll blow up the size so that way it's readable on screen. Great question. Yeah, thanks for stopping by, my friend. Really, really appreciate it. Hope the story reading has been intriguing and helpful to you. Wow, Ghost, that is so cool. First off, congrats. Congratulations, my friend, that you're making progress and that you put your first story out there and you've gone through it. That's actually really, really cool. Aw, yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Really, really appreciate that. I love, love, love all the help, right? And all the recommendations make such a huge difference. Thanks so much, my friends. Kaufman, your watermark needs to be a dragon. I'm actually pretty sure my watermark is a dragon. I actually did change the watermark to a dragon. If you're on YouTube, the dragon is the watermark in the bottom right corner of the screen. Ahead of you, Courtney. I was like, yes, I had gotten to that same bit. And Ghost Cat, that's actually totally all right. You're like, I joined a little bit ago the Discord, and it's all right. So sometimes writers join and they just kind of see how writers interact, and it takes them a little bit to kind of get out of their comfort zone. So that's awesome that you've joined the Discord community already. So that way you can kind of see all the things that we got going on there. Yeah, Mast, you've been with us for a little while, and like I always say, I'm so grateful that we have such like a supportive community of writers with all different skill sets and genres. It really encourages me and inspires me to want to write more, and I always hope that it does the same for all the writers in the community. All right, completely agreed. So let's get into the next story. So we're going to be hopping into Ghost Cat, story number 3. All right, and let's cue this up. So we don't need this, and let's cue up Ghost Cat's story. All right, so okay, and we got Turbulence, a drama by Ghost Cat. I hadn't slept at all the night before, and the flight from Sacramento to LA passed so quickly that I didn't even have a chance to nap like I wanted to. Of course, taking a snooze in LAX was out of the question. I was there on layover for a flight to Santa Maria, and I didn't want to risk missing it. The trip marked my first time returning home since leaving to live on my own 2 years ago. Seeing my family, who I haven't had the best relationship with, I wanted to come back as a self sufficient adult. However, the truth was I dropped out of college and recently lost my job. It wasn't for lack of motivation, but fainting spells that came on unexpectedly. The doctor told me it was stress related. If I couldn't manage a job or school, could I really call myself an adult? I knew they would ask how things were going, and I was struggling to think of an answer that wouldn't be a flat out lie. My mother had said I wouldn't be able to get far on my own. Perhaps she was right, but I refused to admit defeat. There was still time for me to get my life in order. I was managing by doing some freelance art here and there, but the worst thing had happened only a week ago. My kitten, Tommy, had died. I could find another job and eventually go back to college, but Tommy, my little tomatillo, was gone forever. I couldn't dwell on it. I had to put on a brave face and act like everything was okay. That's the reality of being an adult. Walking back and forth kept me awake until my plane arrived. I had wandered around the airport gift shops and found looking through the magazines more boring than walking in circles. There was only a small handful of people waiting to go to Santa Maria with me. It being so close to Thanksgiving, I had expected there to be more. When my flight arrived, I understood why there weren't more people. A handful was all the plane could hold. I followed the other passengers out onto the tarmac. There were ground crew waving us towards a small turboprop plane. The cold night air helped to wake me, and I felt a new surge of energy. This will be interesting. I'd never flown on anything but the big jet airliners, usually packed with so many people it was about as fun as riding in a Greyhound bus. I climbed up the stairs into the plane, squeezing my bag through the doorframe. My seat was 2B, which was in the first row. Even though this plane only held about 20 seats, I still felt kind of special for getting to sit in the front row. I wasn't by the window. That privilege was reserved for whoever had seat 2C, and as the passengers filled the plane, it seemed like there would be no one to block my view of the window. There were very few people on the plane, and they all looked like the well-to-do folks that lived in Santa Maria and Pismo Beach. If someone told me they were all heading to the same house, I would have believed it. It wasn't like the flight I had been on earlier, in which people from all walks of life found themselves having to sit uncomfortably close. For example, I had sat next to an elderly Indian couple who wasn't pleased with the rowdy group of high school basketball players talking loudly. Also on the plane was an exhausted looking mother trying to wrangle her unruly toddlers who kept kicking the seats of businessmen in the row in front of them. Compared to my last trip, this one seemed like it would be quiet and perhaps even a pleasant experience. In the row behind me, two older men discussed traveling and swapped stories of their trips to places like Hawaii and the Caribbean. It seemed like I could have a little shut-eye on the flight at least. It started to flash in my bag for earpods since we would be waiting a few minutes before taking off. That's my seat. I looked up to see where the gruff voice had come from. A man wearing a baseball cap and a 5 o'clock shadow stood above me, holding out his ticket for me to see. Seat 2C. He looked a bit disheveled and annoyed. Oh, right. Here you go, man. I wasn't in his seat, but I was in his way. There was no room to scoot past me to his seat. I had to get out into the aisle to let him through. He plopped down into the chair and turned to me when I got back into my seat. Hey, at least I'm not fat. I wasn't quite sure if he was trying to be funny by that statement, but I feigned a chuckle and quickly went back to look for my earpods. As I dug in my bag, I noticed he had an open can of some kind of energy drink in his jacket pocket. Strange. Why carry it in your pocket? If he's not careful, he could spill it all over himself. Or me. The two men in the row behind us had turned their conversation from travel to politics. I found my earpods and placed them in my ears. I turned up the volume to an energetic song blocking out any conversation that might be headed my way. The man sitting next to me pulled out the energy drink from his jacket and took a drink before sticking it in the pocket that held the magazines in front of him. It was one of those tall aluminum cans with blue lighting and black and silver lettering spelling out Monster. The kind of energy drink that had enough caffeine in it to kill a horse. Except from the smell of it, I knew it wasn't an energy drink at all. A few more songs played, and I was finally getting comfortable when I heard an angry voice to the right of me. I turned to see that whatever was said was not directed at me, but the two men in the row behind us. Turning around, I saw the faces of the older gentlemen. They looked shocked. One of them had their mouth hanging open, not saying anything. The man sitting next to me glared at the two over his shoulder. There was an incredible tension that filled the cabin. I looked around to see if anyone else had witnessed the scene. In the row across from the two older men, a woman in a cozy looking sweater gave me a sympathetic smile that seemed to be saying, "I'm so sorry you have to sit next to that guy." I had never been more grateful for my earpods. The stewardess, a stone faced young woman with her dark hair tied in a bun, stood up in front of us to give us the regular safety precautions. She looked like she could have been in the military before, or perhaps a nun at a strict Catholic school, the ones where they strike kids on the knuckles with rulers. She went through her directions so quickly and mechanically, as though she had done it a million times. For a second, I pondered the possibility that she could be a robot. The man leaned towards me. "That's impressive. I could never talk like that." The smell of alcohol followed his statement. I nodded. The stewardess was showing us how to fasten our seatbelts, all the while talking at an incredible speed and wearing a very stern look on her face. She talks so fast, it's scary," he said. "Some people are just really good at their job." I took out my earpods and put my phone on airplane mode, as I was sure one of the things she was saying was to turn off all electronic devices. I sighed. There was no avoiding the guy now. When the stewardess had finished her monologue, she shot us a scolding look, and I involuntarily hid my knuckles in my jacket. "What's in Santa Maria?" "My family." I wasn't looking forward to any conversation with the guy, but I couldn't hide behind my AirPods anymore. "Visiting. You know, it's Thanksgiving and all that." He continued looking at me as if expecting me to say more. Turning my head away from him, I took in my surroundings, noticing how different the cabin of the plane was from the big airliners. Never been in this small of a plane. He tapped on the wall of the cabin next to him, where the window normally would be. The window was actually about 2 feet further up, which I thought was peculiar. "It's a prop plane," he said. "Look out the window and you'll see the propeller. It's right next to us." I leaned forward to see a part of the large propeller. It really was right next to us. Only the thin wall of the cabin stood between us and the massive blades. Imagine anything goes wrong and that thing would tear through this wall like butter and probably rip us to pieces. "Don't say such a thing." I shook my head, trying to rid myself of the imagery. "Don't worry. I'll get the brunt of it." He smiled. He seemed pleased with my reaction. I had a feeling this flight was going to feel a lot longer than it was. We hadn't even gotten off the ground yet. He held out his hand to me. "I'm Erwin." I resisted the urge to laugh and shook his hand. That name fit him too well. "I'm Jenna. Nice to meet you." "So, Jenna, where are you coming from?" "Davis," I said. "That's near Sacramento." He nodded. "I know where Davis is. I've got family up in Woodland." His eyes were half closed and looked glazed over, and he reeked of alcohol. This guy was really drunk. I didn't ask him anything about Woodland and instead made myself busy by putting my phone away in my bag. I hoped he would get the hint that I wasn't interested in chatting. All right, so I'm going to end the reading there. Awesome. So, that was actually really, really interesting. You did a really good job of setting up the character at the beginning of the chapter, and giving the character really clear stakes. Now, I think what I liked is that this the character feels very relatable, and I think that's something that works out very, very well for the character. I would say right now, I would say the character development for our character works, the world building works, and I would say right now the opportunities are probably the dialogue and the plot, because I'm not too certain what the plot is of this story, other than that the character is going on a plane ride. It kind of feels like and it's Turbulence, so it's really about how this character is going to understand themselves or find some type of meaning through this journey, through this plane ride. Something's going to happen. And I like that you're doing an interesting job of setting up, like, oh, what happens if something goes wrong with the plane, right? And it's interesting. Irwin is an interesting character. I'm kind of intrigued by Irwin's character, actually. You do some fun things with Irwin. Yeah. So, okay, so let's get into it. I think what I would go with. So, starting from the top, Ghost, I think I love this opening paragraph, by the way. This opening paragraph was my absolute favorite because you set up clear stakes for the character, right? The truth was they dropped out of college and recently lost their job. This was so intriguing. Oh, so I would say that the initial setup for the character works out very, very well. I would actually want a couple more call outs throughout the character's journey into kind of how he's struggling with having being a college dropout and having no job. So like I kind of want some more interiority. I want some more moments where we get some deeper insight on the protagonist on how does the character feel about things. And you do a good job of this in the beginning, but then I feel like once we start really focusing on the plane, you're very focused on on like the physical series of events, and I want a little bit more interiority mixed into it. Right. And then this line here, my mother had said I wouldn't get very far on my own. Perhaps she was right, but I refuse to admit defeat. This is such a great line. Such a great moment. I love that. Such a great way for setting up the character. Right. And then I would break this in a new paragraph. Oh no, I would break that. Then yeah, so because then we're going to the kitten part, which is really, really sad. Like, aw. They lost their little kitten, Tomatillo. Aw. It's so sad. Yeah, Courtney, that's a good question, right? How can they afford to fly to the family if they don't have a job? Mask, you touched on that as well. You mentioned Ghost. You mentioned in the middle. Let's see. I think you mentioned around uh, maybe the 6th page or maybe the 7th. Yeah, so later on you introduce on page 11, the main character's name is Jenna. I this threw me off a little bit because I actually thought the main character was a male. Like because the way that the character was their physical actions kind of, and especially because you introduced them as a college dropout, and maybe this was definitely an assumption on my part. I was assuming that the character was a male, and I had no clue. You're like that the character was a female until you introduced her as Jenna on page 12. So I think what I would do, and especially because you don't use any she pronouns with the main character, I think I would set that up in the very beginning. So I think that I would just make that clearer earlier on. Yeah. I was like, maybe she's walking to the plane and she checks her phone and she looks at like herself in her phone camera, or maybe she passes by a window and she sees a reflection, but just something that helps instill her gender, I think would be really good. Yeah, and Courtney, you said something really interesting. You're like, kittens aren't known to die suddenly. So, but that's really traumatic, right? Yeah, it's like you could play in the little kitten tomatillo. That's like the saddest thing, to have a kitten and the kitten dies. Yeah, that's definitely really interesting to have the kitten. You could play into this little tomatillo more frequently. I actually kind of like that. Okay, so let's see. Yeah, so I think what I really want to know is, because you set up the character's motivation here with them like being a dropout and them having lost their job, but then even when they're on the plane, I feel like that, like I don't get more of that. And I want more of that because I want to understand what is the plot, like what's the obstacles that the character is dealing with. And I'm not sure what are the obstacles. You set up what the character's overarching character journey is, with being a college dropout. They're going to go see their family who they're fragmented with. Like, that's clear. But I'm not sure when they get onto the plane what the obstacles are. It kind of seems like the obstacles is Erwin, this like kind of kooky guy who's seems like is kooky alcoholic, and then maybe something's going to happen with the plane, right? So I might set up like, oh, they get on, and you could play into all the things that happen on planes that build up suspense, right? um, they get on, or he passes by the captain and a stewardess, and the stewardess says, well, something's wrong with the plane. In hushed He passed by a stewardess, and in hushed whisper she said, where we might have to delay, something's wrong with the engine, or something, like in passing, right? You could do some things to add tension to it, but like things like that. Or it felt like they were waiting on the tarmac for over an hour, right? They should be going by now, something must be wrong. And then they're waiting, and then he's thinking about, oh well, what if something happened and I never saw my family. um I It would be too soon, kind of like my little kitten Tomatillo was too soon, and I wish I had more time with little Tomatillo. That was such a tragic death, and this happened. So I would just add more tension throughout to keep the reader a little more engaged. The real story is the interaction between Erwin and Jenna. Interesting, interesting. Okay, so then Erwin and Jenna. Okay, so if that's the real story, then I see why you're playing up Erwin as a character. Then if that's the case, you kind of want to get through, like, you want to get to the Erwin moment sooner. If that's the real story, you want to get to Erwin sooner. After you've set up the Tomatillo, the cat, and the motivation, all of this stuff for the plane stuff is kind of just extra, right? Because if it's really about Erwin, then let's get to Erwin sooner, right? So this is like what, one, two, it's about 2 pages that you could probably just cut and make it one paragraph of them going through the tarmac, and them going to the plane, and then them sitting down. And then that's my seat. I look up to see where the gruff voice had come from. So, and this is something with your dialogue, Ghost Cat. Um, some of your dialogue tags are a little confusing. Some of them work, and then some of them are confusing. So, what I would recommend for your dialogue tags is clarifying who is speaking. So, that's my seat. I looked up to see where the gruff voice had come from. Instead, I would say, that's my seat. A gruff voice commanded. A gruff voice commanded. I looked up, and then I looked up to see, and then I would go like this. There you go. And then I looked up to see a man wearing a baseball cap and a 5 o'clock shadow, standing above me, holding out his ticket. Holding out his ticket. Right. So then I would go like that. Um, And that's my C, a gruff voice commanded, right? Because that's just a clearer speech tag. Where the other one, it was just like kind of confusing, but this just clearer. You generally you want the speech tag right next to the dialogue, so it's as clear as possible. A gruff voice commanded, or that's my C, commanded a gruff voice. Like you could do that as well. Commanded a gruff voice. That would be another way, but I think the other way sounds better. All right. And then just make sure anytime a new speaker speaks that they always have a new paragraph. Yeah, and I think that'd be the biggest thing. Like I would say anytime a new person speaks, make sure this is a new paragraph. So that way it's clear, because there are a couple times where I just wasn't sure who was speaking. I wanted to, because Erwin seems like a really interesting character. And I like that you did this setup. All right, here you go, man. And just something like I don't. Here you go, man. I would never see a girl say man. This was something else that led me to believe that this character was a guy. All right, here you go, sir. I would go something like that. This is like such a guy thing to say. Oh, here you go, man. FYI, especially if the main character Jenna is a female, obviously. Right, and then here, right? All right, here you go, man. So once again, since this is Jenna speaking right here, um, anytime a new speaker speaks, needs to be a new paragraph. That is just dialogue rules. This is not a subjective thing. This is dialogue rules in general. Hey, at least I'm not fat. Yeah, and Mary, I saw your comment. Could you make him seem a little more drunk? Which I think could actually be fun as well. This could actually play up this. Hey, at least I'm not fat. The guy, the the guy chuckled as he stumbled, stumbled back a few steps before squishing past me. Right. So I think you could have more moments where you want to insinuate maybe the guy's drunk if he's an alcoholic, or maybe that he's just like really tipsy and he has this like big personality. Especially like play into that, because that's the tension of this. Yeah, so that would be the tension of this. Play into the guy's alcoholism a little bit more. Right. So, and then this is interesting, right? So, you notice that he had an energy drink in his pocket. My guess is the energy drink probably has alcohol in it, which is like, I think that's what's happening here. The two. And then anytime you have like a new idea, make sure it's a new paragraph. Right. So then essentially what we're doing is, because you're trying to set up foreshadowing with Erwin. Um, right. And let's just say that this way, I'm just going to adjust this back to 12-point font for a second. This is a paragraph is a little lengthy. It's still doable. But what you want to do is you just want to make sure that you don't have too long of paragraphs unless it's like necessary. And what's happening right now is this paragraph has about 6 different ideas in it. So it potentially you might lose the reader because you're introducing all these different ideas in a single paragraph. You have the 2 men in the row, turn up the volume, the man sitting next to me pulled out. So you have one, this is one idea. Let's see, and I'll do this. So this is one idea right here. Then we go Erwin, the man sitting next to me, pull out the energy drink. It's all one of those. And then this is idea number 2. And then a few more songs playing. I was finally getting comfortable. This is the angry voice. Turning around, I saw the older gentleman. They looked shocked. One of them had their mouth. And then this is idea number 3. And then the man saying next to me, glad over the shoulder. Yep. And the row across from me, the 2 older men. And then this is idea number 4. And then in the row across from me, the 2 older men and a woman in a cozy looking sweater gave me a sympathetic smile. And then this is idea number 6. So you've squished 6 ideas, right? And now I'll just pull back so you can see this. But you see what you've done is you've squished 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So not 6, 5. So you've squished 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ideas into one paragraph. And what happens is sometimes you can do more ideas in a paragraph. Like sometimes it can happen, but the more you introduce into a single paragraph, the more you chance losing the reader, right? They're more likely to forget this by the time they get down to the bottom. In the row across, because technically you go in the row across from the 2 older men, a woman in a cozy looking sweater. So what you would do is you want to separate these into either different paragraphs or restructure it. So that way the paragraphs are still touching upon the same idea. So that was just a little practice. I just wanted to give you a little good practice. Yeah, so definitely some really good practice there. Just give you an idea. Especially when you're starting out, I like to keep ideas for paragraphs. Keep your paragraph idea at a single idea per paragraph to make it easier for you. And then we start getting into the Irwin and his alcoholism. So I think that's interesting. And I think if you just clean up the speech tags with the dialogue, it'll just make it a little easier. Like, she talks so fast, it's scary, right? That's Irwin. Some people are just really good at their job. I took out my ear pods. Yep. Right. And then, yeah, so then I think the dialogue gets a little clearer. I would just make sure to clarify, make sure the speech tags are added, and you should be in a good place, my friend. Awesome. And I think that's everything. I think that's everything that that's all the feedback I have for you, my friend. That is all the feedback. So once again, really, really great work. I really enjoyed that. And awesome. Thanks for submitting, my friend. Yeah, Ghost. And once again, I want to I really want to commend Ghost that you said that this was your first story that you wrote. That was really, really awesome. You did such a great job. Like for that being the first story, like awesome. I've written hundreds of thousands of stories over the course of my life. And I'm still learning as a writer, right? We have writers of all skills and all backgrounds here. So I want you to recognize and feel so proud of what you've accomplished. Don't compare yourself to anybody else. Never compare yourself to others, and recognize that you're on your own journey and you're doing a really, really great job. I saw there were some really great recommendations here in the chat. I think I saw Mass suggested Save the Cat, which is a really great. Yep, Mass, I saw you saw Save the Cat. Yep, I just bought Save the Cat. Haven't read it yet. Save the Cat will really help with plotting. Now, the original Save the Cat was really for screenwriting. I think they came out with another edition, which was Save the Cat for books actually, which might be more apt, but the plotting principle still works the same. It's really just understanding storytelling structure and what the different beats are of movies and storytelling and scenes. So it's definitely a good one. Great recommendation. Let's see, Mary also recommending Writers Inc. and How Not to Write a Novel. Better World Books is pretty good, as is Thrift Books. Ooh, some other good writing recommendation books. Hey, what's up, Emma? I saw you hop into the stream, my friend. Hope all's well with you today. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we have a lot of writing YouTubers as well. Like I do writing. Oh, it's been a while. I need to do some more writing streams. I need to do more writing technique streams, but there'll be more coming up. There's a lot on YouTube as well for understanding and improving as a writer, which is really good. Yeah, yep, Mike. Thank you for that. Yep, Save the Cat writes a novel. That's the one for novelists and readers. I started with the original Save the Cat because I was focused on screenwriting at the time. But Save the Cat writes a novel uses the same exact structure. It just reorients it and it shifts it more for novel writing instead of the traditional 3 act storytelling that is generally used for screenwriting. But it still uses a lot of the same beats. It's just a different variation. So yeah, I think both books are good, but Save the Cat Writes a Novel is obviously more geared towards novelists and writers. So awesome, 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 awesome. Which means we're gonna hop into our next story. So let's see, Unknown. Unknown, we're gonna be hopping into your story next, which is it's called Phoenix, a fantasy story by Unknown Messenger. And this is a time, let's see, what should we call out? If you're enjoying the stream, share it with a friend. The more writers we bring to the community, the more styles, the more variety, the more stories, and just the more that we help. So it really helps if you tap that share button down below the screen, help us bring some more friends and some more writers to the community, and we'd really appreciate it. This seeing the community growing over time has been such a cool thing. So tap that share button right now. All right, my friend. So that was great work with that ghost cat. And we're going to be hopping straight into Phoenix, which is our next story. All right, perfect. So I think I am all ready. I'm going to get right into it. And I feel pretty good. So we're hopping into another fantasy one, which is always fun. And I think I am all ready. So let's hop into Phoenix. Phoenix. Chapter 1. Wern. Looks like the request. I would like to know if my pacing is a little too fast or not. So it looks like the focus is going to be on pacing today. All right. So the sun shines through the velvet curtains, masking my glass windows. The sunlight shining directly onto my closed eyes, waking me from my deep sleep. I groan, forcing my eyes open, and let the light blind me. I sit up, grab my glasses from my bed, and put them on. Today is the day, I utter softly. I slowly stumble to my wardrobe, opening it with a shaky hand. I grab the white sleeveless shirt with detached sleeves and black embroidered plants. I'm forced to wear it to the summoning of my familiar ceremony. I hope I don't get a weak one, especially for my title's sake and lineage. Come on, my dear. This day will be the best day of my life. So put a damn smile on your face, or I will make you. My mother sweetly whispers as she fixes my shirt, though I hear the hiss in it. I nod as I put an artificial smile on my lips, crafted through years of my mother teaching me. Of course, mother, I will make this the best day of your life. Her sweet smile turns into a scowl as she turns and walks away. Her heels hit the marble floor, letting me know she would loom over me the entire ceremony. I sigh as my hand moves on its own to fix my glasses. The cold, blue-hued light shines through the stained glass window on the ceiling, casting an eerie glow across the room. A shiver runs down my spine. I swear she has you wrapped around her finger, a warm voice says over my shoulder. I glance over to see my cousin, though we are not related by blood. His smile is soft and loving. He tilts his head slightly. As he shakes it. I know, it's just so ingrained in my head that I can't stop myself from doing what she says. His eyes soften, but I swear I can see a hint of annoyance or anger. I turn my head to look up at the stained glass ceiling, searching for the reason I exist or anything to do with me being here. Getting lost in the pictures of familiars of my ancestors, my eyes land on a silhouette of a phoenix. The founder's familiar, a blue phoenix, or so the stories say. The only person in documented history to have one. The sound of footsteps coming closer, then an arm wrapped around my waist in a flirtatious manner, causes me to jump slightly and let out a soft squeal. A laugh meets my ears as I turn to look at the owner of the arm. What makes you think that you can scare me like that, Thorn? I whine as I pull myself out of my cousin's grasp. I turn to face him, taking a few steps back while crossing my arms over my chest, with a pout on my lips. A laugh escapes Thorn just as he shakes his head. A small smile forms on his lips whilst he looks me over. A shiver runs down my spine. Can't a guy hold his future wife in his arms? He laughs, striding over to me again. I continue to take steps back from him as he follows me, until I am pushed against a wall. With his arms on either side of my head, trapping me there, Thorn lowers his head so his lips meet mine in a hungry kiss. Knowing if I try to resist, he'll get angry, so I just give in and kiss back. My eyes close so I don't have to see his face so close to mine, whilst I fight the urge to just push Thorn away from me and run into the ceremony room. But I don't want to go in there yet, or at all. Just when I thought he'd want to go further, I opened my eyes and spotted my mother's familiar, beautiful white snake named Inasa. I pushed Thorn away from me and spoke before he got angry. My mother's familiar is watching us. I pant, whipping my mouth from any lingering taste of my cousin on my lips. He glances behind and huffs in annoyance when he sees the snake. While stepping back from me, thank the magi of the phoenix, I don't have to do that anymore. I push past Thorn and walk over to Inasa, bending down after reaching out my hand for her to slither into. She does right away, while looking between me and him behind me. Her eyes shine a soft purple, letting me know my mother is looking through her eyes. And also turns to look at the door of the ceremony hall. A sigh escapes my lips, knowing that it's time for me to summon my familiar. I stand up and face the door, taking a deep breath to calm my nerves. I stand in front of the altar, pushing up my glasses. My gaze is on the tome that helps me summon my familiar. My life partner, in a way. A shaky hand stretches out to the tome, flipping through the pages until one catches my eye. One finger moves to a line of text that seems to have faded from time, but the words come to me naturally. Fire of life. The fire of life and magic come to me. Let my soul guide you to the altar. Escort my partner familiar, this partner of my life, and into death. Tell them that I am calling. The time to join into one is now. Let us be together again. My voice is soft, almost a whisper, giving my magic the power to guide the spell to where it needs to go. The soft glow glides from the home to the altar seamlessly, swirling into the air in a circle, causing the area to glow in a soft, fiery hue. A portal forms in the swirling circle, causing a blinding light to come from it. I close my eyes while shielding them with a hand. This feels more powerful than I thought it would. When the light fades, a thundering screech fills the room, causing people to gasp and whisper to each other. My hand moves from my eyes as I open them, before landing on a beautiful silhouette of a bird. A bird of prey, maybe? But I haven't seen one like them before. Instinctively, I move towards, reaching out to them. the avifauna turn their head to look at me. The fiery colored bird coos softly, stretching their head out to rub it against my hand gently. A smile forms on my soft, plump pink lips. At the same time, a warm feeling fills my heart when we first touch for the first time. I can tell they feel it too. A soft voice rings in my head, but I know it's from my familiar to my partner. I finally get to meet you, my special inferno flame, inferno flare. It has been so long since I've chosen you as mine. The smile grows, reaching my eyes for the first time in years. My soft, scared hands glide down the avian sides. A soothing heat radiates from their body, mesmerizing every inch in my memory so I can describe it by heart. It's so good to finally meet you, I utter softly back in my head. A gasp finds its way to my ears from close by, causing me to turn to look at the person. My mother is standing there, her mouth agape. The murmurs of people talking to each other fills my ears again too. Curiosity fills me, while I step away from my life partner without realizing it. Their head turned to look at the crowd, almost annoyed that our moment was disturbed. Is that a phoenix? My mother finally exclaims, stepping back a bit. My eyes go wide at what she says, turning to face the avifauna. They just nod their head while spreading their wings and take flight. Without saying a word, instinctively I follow where they are flying off to. Where are you going, Inza? The name falls from my tongue naturally without me even realizing it. Now that I know they are a phoenix, they glide through the closed door. The door rips open when I grab the handle. Without missing a beat, I continue to chase after my familiar. All right, and that is a good ending beat. I was like, yeah. All right, so that was a good ending beat. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. All right. So I really like that. I was definitely a fan of that. When I think about what worked really well of that, I think you did a really interesting job with the world building. The world building was actually my favorite. I was so intrigued by this familiar type ceremony. It was actually really, really cool. I wanted to know more. And then you built it up with the mother and the phoenix, and that was actually really cool. I was intrigued. You also did great character development work, which maybe is a little plotting with the asshole guy who comes and starts making out with her, right? Like, okay, that's or the cousin, right? Asshole cousin, even worse, right? So that was actually a great, great obstacle. I was such a fan of that. So I think right now world building is very well done, and the plot I really like it. I'm trying to ask myself if I have an understanding of the protagonist, and I'm not quite certain that I understand the protagonist just yet. Granted, we're still a little early on, so it's a little subjective, but I could kind of go back and forth on this one. So that's kind of where my overall thoughts are. Let's hop into the manuscript itself. So when I go back to the beginning up here, let's start with what we got from the beginning. I would like to know if my pacing is a little too fast or not. I've been known to have fast pacing. Actually, I had no problems with the pacing. I thought the pacing was well done. I think the opportunity that I'm thinking of is I want a little bit more understanding of the character. Yeah, I think I want a little bit more understanding of the character and of our protagonist, honestly. But from you asked about the pacing, I had no issues with the pacing. I actually thought the pacing was well done personally. Let's see. So the sun, let's starting with the beginning. Let's see. The sun shines through the velvet curtains, masking my glass windows. Okay. So let's see. I ground, forcing my eyes open and let the light blind me. Yeah, so and I mean this is a good opening to it. Since you're setting up with the familiar, I'm fine with this opening. Um, the only thing I don't get is I don't get who this main character is. That's the only thing. And then I wasn't sure gender wise if the main character was a. I think the main character is a guy. I'm pretty sure the main character is a guy, but I wasn't quite certain about that. And I love this. What a great moment with the mom, right? Come on, my dear, this day will be the best day of my life. So put a damn smile on your face. Like, okay, Cruella DeVille, or one of those like Disney mom villains. One of those Disney moms. That's totally what the vibe I got from that. I hear the hiss in it. I nod as I put an artificial smile on my lips, crafted through years of my mother teaching me. I like this. This sets up a really good precedent for the mom as this kind of like overbearing presence. I felt like that was really, really good. Mm. Interesting unknown. So you're saying he's a little mysterious for a reason. Interesting. Okay, so you don't want us to know that much about the main character, which is fine, but the what you do wanna make sure. Yeah, main is a guy. Okay, cool. I thought the main was a guy, but I wasn't 100% certain. But okay, so that's fine with making him mysterious, but you still want the reader to feel an emotional connection with him. So even if it's insinuating his mystery, what you the question you want to ask yourself is, why should the reader care about this protagonist? And I'm not quite sure yet. Now, granted, we're still a little early on in the story, so it's not quite critical yet. But right now, from the first section, I'm intrigued by the ceremony. So the things that I care about as a reader right now, after reading this, I care about the ceremony. I care about this mom character, and then I feel bad for him when he's kind of assaulted in a sense by the cousin. And I think the kissing thing, well, I think that the resolution of that could be stronger if we get a better understanding of who our main guy is, of who our main protagonist is. I nod as I put an artificial smile on my lips, crafted through years of my mother teaching me. What a good line. What a great line, by the way. I love that. All right. So I'm really, really happy with that. Absolutely love, love, love. A shiver runs down my spine. I swear she has you wrapped around her finger. Yep. And then this is the cousin. And it's kind of interesting, right? So where I get the sense that he's a mama's boy of some type because the mom is very overbearing. And I like this. So you foreshadow the phoenix, which is actually really, really interesting. I like. I like that we're doing some foreshadowing of this type of phoenix character, which is really, really intriguing, by the way. Let's see. The sound of footsteps coming closer, then an arm wrapped around my waist in a flirtatious manner. Okay, and this is why I was confused about the gender, right? Because Thorin says, "Can't a guy hold his future wife in his arms?" He laughs, striding over to me again. Okay, right, and it's like, okay, that makes. I mean, it's all right. So it's the guy, the cousin, the guy is just calling. Okay, so when he says wife, I had assumed and insinuated a female gender, but really he's just being that he's he has the power in the relationship in his the supposed relationship. Can't a guy hold his future wife in his arms? He laughed. He laughed, striding over to me again. Arms on either side of my head, trapping me there. Or knowing if I'll try to resist, I'll get angry, so just give in and kiss back to fight the urge. Can't a guy hold his future husband in his arms? Yeah, I mean, I might because I get it. It's like a power tripping thing. I think I would say lover. I spouse, husband. Yeah, I don't know. I might suggest change it. I might suggest changing that. I get why you're going wife, because it's a dominance thing. But I might suggest adjusting the word choice. Oh, Paramore. I mean, Paramore's interesting, but I don't. That doesn't feel like that fits this Thorn character. Thorn kind of feels like he's like more of like a rough and tumble asshole. Is kind of the vibe I'm getting from him. That doesn't seem like that would be in his vocabulary, at least from what the little that we know about so far. Mm. Well, this so unknown. I saw you're like, I'm not good at making my main character likable. Well, I think you've done a couple things that make us intrigued by him. Um, so I think this moment of him being basically being kissed, assaulted by his cousin, is a nice obstacle. And I think what you can do is after the familiar moment, after he gets saved by the mom's familiar, well, actually, you could do it in two ways. So when he's being kissed, you could add some interiority here, before the familiar comes in, of how does he feel about himself? How does the protagonist feel about himself in this moment, right? So I would do a paragraph here that answers this question of, oh, I hate myself so much. This makes me feel worse because this bad thing's happening to him. And for the reader potentially will connect with him because, oh, wait, he's being attacked. But right now he just gives in and we don't have enough understanding of his character to understand like what's quite going on. But you could actually elevate this tension point further by giving us interiority into how does he feel about what's happening. And then you're using a save the cat moment, but you're essentially helping the reader to relate and not relate but empathize with the character, and that will be something that can help make your character more likable because he's being victimized from the very beginning. He's being victimized by his mother, he's being victimized by his cousin, and he wants to gain a sense of control by going after his familiar, which is super cool. So I think, yeah, I think this would be a good moment to help problem and making him more likable. Yeah, and let's see. I do like this, right? Thank the Magi of the Phoenix. I love that so much. That is some great world building there. Thank the Magi of the Phoenix. I'm like, ooh, I'm intrigued. I'm so intrigued by this Phoenix aspect because you've now touched upon it a few times. That's just so intriguing to me. And I love your naming structure. Inasa, Thorn, great names, by the way. Really great names. They both feel like they're part of the same world. Very well done. And then with the snake familiar, the eyes shining a soft purple, I think that paints a clear image. So I think I really love how you went about that. Yeah, and then it's time to do the ceremony. So this was a nice ending to this section. I actually like from a structure wise, I think the section was well done. And I like these moments. These moments of interiority, fire of life is so interesting. I think it's so unique to your storytelling and it makes me even more invested in wanting to understand your world building. So I think that's actually really cool. And then from a description, I think I would I would describe what this magic power looks like a little bit more, because I'm just not sure what it is. My voice is soft. I'm just giving a whisper to my magic, the power to guide the spell to where it needs to go. The soft glow glides from the home to the altar seamlessly. So what do you mean by a soft glow? So like my voice and where glides from the foam. The soft glow glides from the foam to the altar seamlessly. So like, is it like it's like a light? Is it like a white ball of light that appears in midair? And it's like coming from them to the altar? I think I would just add a little bit more description. Yeah, and I actually like that, right? I think you're saying that's how I show the character's thoughts. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good strategy. That actually works out really, really well in Known. I would keep playing with that structure. And then just some description for what it looks like to just paint a better visual for the reader. Mm. Oh yeah, I wasn't sure what avifauna was. I was like, what is avifauna? So it's a type of bird. Okay, I'd assumed it was something to do with birds. Before landing on a beautiful silhouette of a bird. Interesting. And I think I was good with the rest of this. I like what you did with the before I know a soft voice rings in my head, but I know it's from my familiar, no, my partner. And by the way, so dialogue, you're only going to use dialogue if a character is physically saying something. Since you're using italics, you're basically doing like the character speaking in the mind. I think what you would do, no dialogue because the character is not physically saying something, but you would set it up. So a soft voice rings in my head, but I know it's from my familiar. No, my partner. The I would go like this. The familiar says speaks. The familiar speaks in my mind. Right. I would do something like that. I finally. Oh, I mean, actually, you've kind of set it up here. You could also break up here, right? You could do something like this. And you could split that up. A soft voice rings in my head. I finally get to meet you, my special inferno flare. Or another way to do this is you could break them up by lines. And it might be interesting to do this. A soft voice rings in my head. I finally get to meet you, my special inferno flare. But I know it's from my familiar. The voice is. I know the voice is from my familiar, no, my partner. It has been so long since I've chosen you as mine. The smile grows, reaching my eyes for the first time in years. I was like, I think this would be my smile. My smile grows, reaching my eyes for the first time in years. My soft, scared hands glide down the even side. Yep, so good to finally meet you. I utter softly back in my head. Right, and I think that works. Right, and I think you've kind of set it up here that works as they're like interior conversation essentially. And then we had the mom is getting upset, like, oh, is that a phoenix? That's super cool. That's some good plotting. Yeah, and I mean, I think that's good for the rest of the section. I think that's definitely good for the rest of the story. Unknown. Yeah, that's all the feedback that I got for you, my friend. Thank you so much for sharing that. That was definitely a really good start to a story. And I'm really intrigued. As a reader, I really want to know more about the Phoenix. I feel really bad about the Thorn character. I kind of just feel bad for this character right now. I kind of pity them a little bit. I'm like, wow, they get attacked by their mom and their cousin. Clearly they don't have good family relationships. So that is definitely something. Right now I feel bad for the main character, and I want to know more about this cool phoenix. That kind of seems like phoenixes are a part of the culture. So very, very much intrigued about that. So very, very much so. So I thought that was really, really cool. And yeah, thanks so much for submitting, my friend. That was actually a really, really great story. So definitely feel free to submit more in the future, and loving seeing how it's coming along, Unknown. All right. So thank you so much. And with that, oof, man, we've been making some good progress. We've gotten some good solid stories in today. Definitely today feels like we're a focus on fantasy. I know I've definitely been enjoying it. Now, I know we've gone a couple stories, and I think I probably spent more time on the critique portions of some of them today, but I feel pretty happy with what we were accomplished. But we're kind of hitting that 3-hour mark now, so it's probably going to bring us to creative writing on the morrow. So thank you all for joining us today. It's been a really, really strong series of stories. And yeah, that's what I got for today. Make sure that if you want feedback on your story, submit now. The sooner you submit your story in the story and critique submission guideline, the sooner that I can get to them in future critique streams. So highly, highly recommend. And then if you don't want the story to end, like let's say like, hey, I want to listen to more stories, linked down below is the Reading Sprints for Storytellers playlist. Linked down in the YouTube description. Definitely go check it out. It's a playlist to some of our previous story and critique show episodes, which were really, really great if you want to catch up on more of the stories, or you just want to hear and read more. So very, very cool, and definitely worth checking out. I linked a lot of stories in there. And then also make sure to come back and join us for tomorrow. Tomorrow we will be chatting. Tomorrow is the next episode of the Create Right Now podcast. Any writers who are struggling or dealing with imposter syndrome, that is what you're going to want to show up for. I've invited guest author Betsy Kulikowski, who is a best-selling author, and we're going to be talking about how her unique strategy for overcoming imposter syndrome. So if you've ever dealt with imposter syndrome, if you've ever felt like you're not a real writer, or you feel like you compare yourself to others, or you struggle with writing in general, you're going to want to make sure to come back and check us out tomorrow for the next episode of the Create Right Now podcast. We'll be back same time, 1 p.m. Pacific, 2, 3, 4 p.m. Eastern. 1 Pacific, 4 Eastern tomorrow, and it'll be a great stream. So definitely come join us. It's been really, really awesome. And don't forget, like the stream on your way out. Help us show the algorithm that writing streams are cool. All right, my friends, it has been real. It has definitely been real. If I read your stories today, I'll definitely follow up in an email. But thank you all for submitting. I hope to see more of your stories in the future. And for those I didn't get to today, I'm sorry, but you know what? Well, they'll get queued up for future critique streams. So definitely thank you for the submissions. But unfortunately, that brings us to the end of the stream. Don't forget, words are wind, but stories are forever. I'm Kauffman, and I'll catch you on the morrow. Stay creative, writers.
Right now.
Right now.
Right now.
Right now.
Right now.
Because it's